Kwatsi, Keshe, greetings everyone, and welcome to our Thursday Crow Canyon webinar series. I am John Jihadi. I am of the Pueblos of Laguna and Zuni, and I'm one of the educators here at Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. It is my honor to be your host and guest moderator for today's webinar series. I hope this finds you all well wherever you are at joining us for today's webinar. For our first-time guests to our Crow Canyon webinar series, and certainly to our appreciated guests, I'd like to tell you that Crow Canyon is a nonprofit archaeological research and education center located on the outskirts of Cortez in the southwest corner of Colorado, where we're very fortunate to be very close to Mesa Verde National Park. We invite you to visit our website on the address you see on your screen, or you can email us at info@crowcanyon.org. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what Crow Canyon does, certainly visit our website, or you can always send us an email at info@crowcanyon.org. There are a number of resources available on our website, and especially for educators, there's a fantastic number of resources that are available to help students at any level. So we invite you to join, to visit our website. Among the number of resources that are available to the public is this weekly webinar series, which we're glad you're joining us, if you're joining us on Zoom, or if you're joining us streaming live on Facebook. We invite your comments or questions for our speaker today. And so if you'd like to participate, we ask that you place your comment or question in the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. In addition to live streaming of our webinar series, they are recorded. And later you'll have an opportunity to view past recorded episodes on the Crow Canyon YouTube channel. You can find that link of past recorded webinars on the Crow Canyon website, which again is crowcanyon.org. In an effort of promoting culture and science, we take time to begin with a land acknowledgement. Crow Canyon is an archaeological research center. It acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene, Hickory Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. With the work we're doing at Crow Canyon, we seek to bring light into the darkness of memory that these lands, waters, wildlife, and her descendants hold as a result of policies of removal, genocide, and displacement. We seek paths that support and align with Indigenous people and communities. We are grateful and honor the contributions of present-day Indigenous communities, descendants, and colleagues with whom we partner who have helped guide our work and our mission. The work we do at Crow Canyon would not be possible without the generous contributions and gifts from a multitude of donors. And we invite you to join this supportive and greatly appreciated group of individuals in supporting and contributing to all that Crow Canyon does. Specifically, in recognition of our beloved colleague, Taylor Dell Hasbrook, our webinars continue to educate and enlighten because of her influence through the webinar series. The QR code that you see on your screen will help those who are interested in contributing or by going to the Crow Canyon website. In addition to the Crow Canyon website resources and recorded webinars, we offer experiential learning opportunities through our cultural explorations programming in an effort to merge science and the diverse Indigenous cultures of the Southwest through on-site experiences. The awesome programs you see listed on your screen are the learning opportunities that are scheduled for 2026, and registration is now open if you'd like to participate. If you would like to know more about these unique experiences, certainly go to our website where you will see more information, including some recorded video of past cultural exploration programs. Space is limited, so if you're interested in these on-site fantastic experiences, don't wait too long, as they sometimes fill up quickly. And there are a number of our return lifelong learners who certainly continue to experience these wonderful, exceptional on-site experiences. Finally, I'd like to inform you of upcoming Crow Canyon webinars that are scheduled for the next couple of weeks. In looking over the information of the topics, may I encourage you to plan to visit us, as they sound really interesting and certainly engaging, and sometimes they are very informative, and hope that you'll be able to make our Thursday webinars part of your weekly schedule. I am honored to introduce to you our special guest speaker, Dr. Estevan Rael-Gálvez. Dr. Rael-Gálvez is the Executive Director of Native Bound-Unbound, Archive of Indigenous Slavery, an initiative funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that leads a global team in a goal to document Indigenous Native slavery across the Western Hemisphere. Trained as an anthropologist, historian, and Indigenous slavery scholar, Dr. Rael-Gálvez has served as the former Senior Vice President of Historic Sites at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Executive Director of the National Hispanic Cultural Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and as the state historian for New Mexico. He received his BA in English Literature and Ethnic Studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and his MA and Ph.D. in American Cultures from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. The basis of his current book project is from his award-winning doctoral dissertation. Dr. Rael-Gálvez is a native son of New Mexico, raised on a farm and ranch stewarded by his family for multiple generations. It is an honor to welcome you to our Crow Canyon webinar, Dr. Rael-Gálvez, and he is joining us from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And again, thank you for taking your time to join us today.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate this. Thank you to Crow Canyon, which is an organization that I began working with decades ago, I think when I was still state historian. So it's such an honor to be here with you. And I think my dear friend Teresa Pascual is the one that actually brought me into the fold again. So I'm so pleased. As I was mentioning earlier to Benjamin and John, we're 7 days out from our launch after 4 years of working on this initiative that I'm going to speak about more now. But so we have 100 moving parts, but we welcome everyone to that as well. But I'm going to give you a sneak peek into some parts of this. I can't give it all away until November 1st, but I'm going to give you some parts of this that I'm really, really excited about. But let me start as I should have. Bupuwave, buenas tardes, good afternoon, everyone. I love just watching where everyone is joining in from Gallup to Florida, from Austin to Chumash country in California. And so I'm just honored by the fact that so many people are joining us today. I'm actually normally in Santa Fe, but Kathleen, thank you for welcoming me as a fellow Burqueño. I'm actually taking care of my 98-year-old father, so I normally live in Santa Fe, but it's wonderful to be able to join you from these lands where we're taught at a very early age that wherever we go, we leave our breath behind us. And for me, this acknowledgement that we learned early on about breath is about life, and it's not just being able to breathe ourselves in a moment when we should not take our breaths for granted, particularly coming out of the pandemic. We're still in it, but also a moment when it's become hard for people to breathe. And so, but it's also an invocation, obviously, connecting us to our ancestors and a reminder to us that what we say and do now reverberates into the coming generations. So I'm really honored to be able to present this today. So I'm going to share my screen and actually begin this sharing. I hope I hope, Ben, can everyone see this? Can I just ask someone? John, can you see my screen? Yes,
Yes, everybody can see your screen. Looks good.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, well, I am so delighted to be able to show this project today. Um, but for me, I always think projects of this magnitude certainly have origin stories themselves. There's always a foundation. There's the reason why we're drawn into telling the stories that we do and doing the type of work that we do. And this project is no different from that. For me, it began early on. For those of you who are watching who were there in 1967 when Alex Haley's Roots was premiered as a syndicated show on national TV at a moment when there were only about 4 television stations versus the multitudes of television stations and options that are available now. I was 7, I think, years old and tuned in that particular moment into what, along with half of the American public, it it was transformative in terms of how people began to talk about slavery and its legacy and race. It changed so much. For me, as a little boy, watching something actually so hard to watch, it it deeply impressed upon me. That is, I was at that age, you're impressionable. And to this day, I can recite lines from it. That's how much it sort of sunk in for me at that particular age. And as my grandmother always told me in a very particular way, when a story is being told well with intention, it should always invite another story to be told. A reminder that here it's not just about storytelling, it's about story sharing. And so for me, at a very early age, I learned that this almost was an invitation to tell another story. At the same time, I was actually listening to other stories being told. One by my great grandmother, Dulcinea, who told the same story every time we visited her. She had been taken away from the village by her grandson to care for her in Pueblo, Colorado. And when my dad, her eldest grandson, would take us to Pueblo, Colorado every year to visit her, she pulled me into her. All of the other kids wanted to be outside playing, and I wanted to get close to my elders and to listen to stories. And she pulled me in and told the story of an ancestor of hers. She told with apology, not wishing that she knew her name, but it's a name that had been taken away. But she referred to her as La India Panana, the indigenous woman who was Pawnee, who had been captured by a different tribe, and she told the story of how another man, a Mexican man, had been captured, and and she told him, this woman told the man, if you take me with you, I will show you how to escape. And they did. They escaped and ended up in a village of Arroyondo, which is just north of Taos. And and we descend from those generations, but it's a story that my grandma Nea told every time that we visited her. And recently I came across a cassette tape of her telling that same story. It had been recorded in the 1970s. And so the moment I heard it, I was transported to being 4, 5, 6 all over again, and just hearing the voices of our ancestors, but also the stories. Um, I also, actually, right behind me hangs a weaving that is attributed to an ancestor of my mother's, a woman who had been captured, a Dene woman, a Navajo woman who had been captured as a young child, brought into the village of Abiquiu, and who came to be known as the matriarch of the Rael family, who would emerge from Abiquiu and continue moving north and settle in the village of Cuesta, one of two of the villages where I was raised in northern New Mexico. When I went off to college, my mother folded this blanket into my hands and said, for strength, protection, and knowledge, so that I would know from where I came from. So I received these stories early on, but I also knew that instinctively that I was not, I don't think, unique in any way, even though these stories had been obscured or silenced. I went on to write my doctoral dissertation on slavery in New Mexico post 1848, interested in those indigenous people who had been captured and held throughout northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. This is one of those important documents that frame my research. It was a list of captives, as I'm just reading the document, acquired by purchase and now in the service of the citizens of Conejos County, Colorado Territory. It's a list of 149 individuals, and as you see here from the columns, it includes the owner's name. That word, owner, should not be lost on us. The name of the indigenous person, where they were, when they were purchased, of where they were purchased, and of from whom they were purchased. And so, again, the word purchase should not be lost on us. And I continue to tell that story in a very different way. So I immersed myself in that, but I also, in the process of immersing myself in this research, I found that it wasn't just these two individuals that I had grown up with, but really 10 other individuals. And I still don't think I'm unique. If you are indigenous, if you're connected to a tribal community in this land that we're in, or a Hispanic community, chances are you descend from this. And the reality is, slavery is one of those institutions and experiences globally that, as I said to a reporter a couple of days ago, there's not a single community globally that likely is not impacted by slavery. The movement and the forced migration and the forced labor of people across time and space. I descend from this woman, and sometimes we receive these stories simply in fragments, like this particular, literally a fragment of a document referring to a woman as an Apache woman named Margarita. I descend from this woman, and I descend from this other document on the right is a woman who is referred to as Doña Inés, perhaps one of the very first indigenous people who is captured from a pueblo here in New Mexico early on, taken into Mexico City, and she's referred to by name when Oñate comes marching back up into this land, and he refers to her as Doña Inés, taken into Mexico City, brought to her original pueblo, which no longer exists, in the Galisteo Basin, as referred to as San Cristobal. And and probably, I don't know, 1 in 5 New Mexicans descends from this woman because she had the two children named Martinez. And then this padron, which is a census on the left-hand side, this is my mom's last known matriarchal ancestor. That is my mother's 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 mother, the last known ancestor from whom my mother descends, and that DNA is passed down to me. And her name was Antonia. She's listed in the Garbizu household, the very first household listed in Santa Fe, simply it listed as India, in a household of a man who had 10 years before, purchased a house for 50 pesos and an Indian woman. And so this is my lifelong work. As I said to another reporter this morning when he asked, is this going to be something you work on indefinitely, or is this going to have an endpoint? I said, I I had the fortune of being able to tell my mother before she passed that I've been able to do many things in my life, but I was born to do this project. And I'm fortunate to be able to bring several people into into the fold to work with me. Okay, so the project framework, what is this? We are working on recovering the history of Indigenous slavery across the Americas. But who is it that we're working on? People say, are you focused on the Chinese who were brought into Mexico, on Africans who are brought into places like Florida or Tennessee or wherever? Our focus is singular, focus on those indigenous native people who were captured across the Americas. This is one of the very first European depictions of indigenous people who were captured and gifted into the Catholic monarchy. You can't see them here, and it kind of represents how their story is often obscured, even in illustrations. At the very center of this painting, I want you to just focus in right below the risen Christ. There's some figures there. I'm going to show you a close-in photo right now. There they are. And so when Christopher Columbus landed in the Caribbean, he took 12 individuals back with him back to Spain on that very first journey and presented them as 6 survived the journey, presented them before the Catholic monarchs. The second voyage, he would take 500 to Spain, all to be distributed throughout Europe and ended up being distributed. And I'm not using that word lightly. That's generally how these what the documents refer to. But this may be the first European depiction. It was a fresco, and it's based at the Vatican, and it was commissioned by the Pope Pope Alexander, who had the audacity to believe that he had the power, and he did, to divide the world in half, cutting it like a piece of cake. But he also had heard about these indigenous people who had been brought back by Columbus and commissioned this painting and included them in the telling, but obscured them into the background. So, but we're also referring to people like who were caught up in the Frobisher campaign, who were also illustrated, people who were taken to places like London. We're talking about people like Malencine, the person who would come to be known as La Malinche, along with 19 others who were again given to Cortés when in the fall of Tenochtitlan, and it began not just a reign of terror and colonialism, but enslavement of indigenous people. And so we're working to tell the story of people like Malencine. We're working to tell the story of Tituba. I think I noticed, and I called attention to it, that someone is joining us from Massachusetts. This woman, by Tituba, those of you who know about the Salem witch trials, all fingers ended up pointing to Tituba. But Arthur Miller, who wrote the play on this, actually obscured her identity, erased her identity entirely by referring to her as Black. She was actually, in every document that it refers to Tituba, identified as the Indian woman Tituba, along with her husband, Indian John. New research has surfaced to point to the fact that she likely was captured on the coast of Venezuela, taken into Barbados, sold, eventually ending up in Salem, Massachusetts. So it's individuals like Tituba. I have done research and collected stories over 30 years of individuals enslaved in the landscape that we're talking about here. People like Juan de Dios Gallegos, who was brought into Abiquiu, and Rosario Romero brought into Taos. John, Juan Carson purchased and brought into the family of that guy named, what's his name? Kit Carson. And so these are the individuals whose stories we center in this project. So where is it that we're talking? We're talking about the Western Hemisphere. Even though it's not to scale, I've located Europe in this as well, and to really reveal the fact that the people were captured from 1492 all the way into the 1500s and beyond, and were being taken legally at that point all the way into Europe in places like London, Lisbon, Seville. But the reality is, so this has become a global story. In many ways, I, someone had mentioned, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is such a large project hemispherically. But inevitably, because people are being moved around, it is actually a global story as well. We are interested no matter when the individuals were captured, and let me be clear, indigenous people were being captured even before Europeans landed in this place that we now refer to as the Americas or the Western Hemisphere. And that would happen intertribally after that. But given but Europeans scaled it way up. That is, and we're looking at all of those empires, not just the Spanish, which is where I've focused in telling the story so far, but the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the British, and certainly it happened, as my work reveals, under the American imperialism. So the period predates 1492, but that's a pivotal period for us. And we've also traced the fact that people are being still held in those households all the way into the 1950s, where they're still being, yes, I said the 1950s, where they are still being listed as servants in those households in the households of the grandchildren of their former captors. Okay, how is it that we're doing this? I have to just pause here and say we likely would not have been able to realize this dream without the support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and Elizabeth Alexander, who's changing the landscape, having us think very differently about the landscape. But I want to thank the Mellon Foundation for believing in me and believing in the project, because it has catalyzed this dream. So it's allowed me to build what I refer to as a constellation of teams. People working, as I often say, from Argentina up to Montreal, Canada, from California or Chumash country to Cuba and into Europe. We have, I keep saying 70, but it's probably about 100 people working on this project, people who have volunteered enormous amount of hours. I'm thinking of someone who is online right now, Priscilla Gutierrez, who actually started with this project way before Mellon even had supported us in this endeavor. So shout out to you, Priscilla, joining us from Santa Fe. We have developed guidelines and standards and training modules, and we've improved on them every year. We have thousands, I think it's thousands, at least hundreds of spreadsheets to actually guide our team. We're thinking of the intellectual property. What does that mean? We're thinking of like, what are we looking for when we're looking for these records? Providing as much guidance as possible. So things that the general public will never see though we're going to actually make as much transparent as possible, has gone into sort of defining the parameters of this project. And of course, the fiscal support has been incredible from not just places like the Mellon Foundation, but the National Trust, Latinos in Heritage Conservation, and beyond. Um, my main job is not just to sustain this financially into the future, but also to build collaborations. And I'm fortunate to be able to showcase this work in many places. I just got back where I was sharing the project at the Sorbonne in Paris. Um, but I've been able to share this with multiple universities and universities supporting us through internships, through faculty sending in work, but also institutions helping us just actually advance this, scholars advancing the project as well. We have, even though we've not launched the project, but will in 7 days, we've launched a robust engagement with communities because from the very beginning, it's been important for me to actually build this collaboratively with descendant communities and indigenous tribal communities. We have an invaluable partnership with StoryCorps where we're recording um, re, um, what this means for indigenous communities. And you see that Teresa is up here, who's a part of the team at Crow Canyon. But we've also these are not interviews; they're conversations between father and a daughter, two best friends, sisters. But we've also had community engagements, what I refer to as memory workshops. And we're actually having another one in Abiquiu on November 8th at 2 o'clock. So if you're interested in that, Site Santa Fe and the Abiquiu Library and Cultural Center are supporting that effort on November 8th. And we are going to continue having these, and not just locally, but nationally and internationally. Okay, how are we doing this in terms of the records that we're doing? So these tiny little images at the bottom of your screen here are actually records. So we're doing research, we're going into archives, we're finding these records online. And there's a whole thing behind how to guide our team with doing that. And then we're transcribing those records fully. Um, we're translating those records to English. We're data encoding and data associating them. So if we have an individual, Maria Antonia, who is listed as Comanche in 1862, and she's captured and brought in and baptized, but then we find her listed in a last will and testament, or in a burial record. We're working to create it. We've developed a process to actually disambiguate, to determine that they're not the same person, or to correlate, to determine it's the same person. Let's make these connections. So the complex system that we have developed from scratch is embedded in all of this. So here's where my team is working now. This map is actually outdated now, but they're working in multiple places, not every place, but multiple places. So it will result in a website. But I like to, when people say a website, it's just a website. Well, it's actually more than that. It's a database, it's a repository, and I'll explain why. So behind all this, what started out as a guide for the research team is a terminology section where we're actually going to show the vocabulary that underlies this entire history. Um, Slavery, indigenous slavery was made illegal in 1542. Not that it mattered, because there were legal loopholes like the Just War Clause that continued to let it happen, but there was also, it was obscured in language. So even when the word esclavo was not listed, people were being listed with terms like criado, sirviente, servant, and many other terms that we've gathered here, both in European languages, but also indigenous words. All of this will be available to the public. We we um, we have a chronology. I think the first chronology that has ever been shown around this, around Native Indigenous slavery, all to be made available to the public. Um, we have a bibliography. I was saying to a reporter this morning, in spite of the fact that there's about 50 years of scholarship, if not more, I think more, about 60, 70 years of scholarship, hundreds of pages. Priscilla knows this because she entered each and every one of these, who that still in the US, I think it's different in places like Mexico and Peru, but in the US, the narrative of enslavement and slavery has not changed, let alone the consciousness, but there's a whole body of research behind it. Okay, so what will you be able to see in this project? You'll be able to find individuals, both the enslaved and the enslavers. You'll be able to, if we have enough material, if you see off to the right, they'll have people pages so that we can trace as much as possible the arc of individual lives and show at some level who they were related to, both the enslavers and enslaved. You'll be able to look at archival records fully, to actually go through those records, whether they are baptisms like this one from Isleta Pueblo, burials like this, where we're going page by page and we're identifying. And here you can see that not only will you be able to see the original record, but you'll be able to see the transcription. We don't have the transcription up here, but you can see the translation as well. All of that will be available. A monumental amount of research and processing of these records has been developed. But I also think of these things as not simply records that tell us a part of the story, but they don't tell us all of the story. So we're including art and artifacts, illustrations, anything that tells us about Indigenous slavery. Songs, blankets like this one behind me, voices, audio, all of those will be available. Places, we're starting to document. This won't be as robust when we launch, but we're starting to document what I refer to as sites of slavery, the architecture of slavery. We're also, I know there's maybe a lot of archaeologists in the room here, and we're starting to use our archaeology to document this as well. So you'll be able to, in time, actually be able to document certain sites. A little treat after this, but I want to be able to say, okay, when the president, Mellon, asked me, who are you doing this for? Why are you doing this? We want to be able to inspire new forms of creative expression, advance new scholarship. As one of my researchers said, Estevan, you haven't even finished your book and we're giving this all away. We're making it easy for scholars to actually be able to find the records. And I said, that's the point. If I do nothing else in my life, let that be my contribution, that I've been able to build something that gives back. These records belong to the world. And it will serve as a source for educators, a well for artists to be able to draw from. But the question that she asked, who are you doing this for? Well, it'll be available to the general public and educators and scholars. That I'm not doing this for scholars. It will be made available, and yes, we're going to make it easy, but I'm doing this for descendant communities and for Indigenous communities to know from where we come from. And so that is my singular why it's the wind beneath my wings, and why I'm doing this work. And that's true of the countless hours, and including volunteers who are actually participating in this. So in a little bit, we're going to share where you can register. It's sold out at MIAC, at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, on November 2nd, but it's open we still have some room at the National Hispanic Cultural Center if you want to come in and to see the launch. There's going to be a lot of great things. We're going to actually feature the website. But here's going to be the website, nativebound-unbound.org. Follow us on any of these platforms. And watch as we've been slow on actually posting this because we've been super busy. But Ben, I don't know where we're at right now, but where are we at? We're 40 minutes in.
Yeah, we have plenty of time for a Q&A. I know there's some questions that have been
But can
asked.
I just show a snippet of just
Please,
like a minute?
please.
I am so excited, and I promised both John and Ben that I would actually reveal something. We're working with a School of Architecture to actually, for those of you who are familiar with the 1766 Urrutia map, it's the first map done of Santa Fe. Let's see, I don't seem like I can share anymore. Can I share? Oh, there it is. Sorry. I'm going to show you a little glimpse of something that just came in to me today. A seat of civil authority, raised and repaired through forced indigenous labor. It was also the place where governors and officials set the policies that shaped 18th century New Mexico, laws and policies that authorized the dispeopling of native homelands and bound indigenous captives into lives of servitude. Nearby stood the chapel of Our Lady of Light, also called the Castrense. Built in the 1760s, it was funded by officers and soldiers of the Presidio. More than a religious space, the Castrense was a military chapel, an institution that embodied the empire's reach and the military campaigns that displaced indigenous people. Okay, I wanted to be able to just share that video. We've taken it off of the parchment two-dimensionally and made it three-dimensional. I'm happy to answer any questions right now.
Terrific. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Rael-Gálvez. May I just kind of begin with my question? We have a lot of them. We're going to get to as many as we possibly can. But you mentioned something early on about this policy, this what we now call a papal bull that split what we now call the Western Hemisphere into two parts. And so perhaps some of our participants on our webinar may not know completely a lot about that. So first of all, if you would explain that decision, as you mentioned, the Pope who felt he had the right to do this. Could you just explain a little bit about that? And then we'll get to some of the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, John. Oh shoot, someone's calling me. I'm going to hang up. This is generally referred to as the doctrine of discovery, but the doctrine of discovery actually includes several papal bulls, which is how you refer to it, and one of those that really justified and allowed the conquest of indigenous peoples. And so in 1492, let's see, I'm getting to it right now, Pope Alexander issued what is referred to as Inter Sectaria. And it was a papal bull that granted the King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella the rights to claim and colonize the lands in the Americas. It's also it's a papal bull that enabled that particular monarchy, the Spanish monarchy, to actually do what they did in terms of not just conquest of land, but capturing of indigenous people. All of this, by the way, I'm so glad that you asked the question, and I mentioned the fact that we have a chronology. All of that will be available. I literally was reading from the chronology that we have that will be available on the site.
Terrific. Let's go to some of the questions. Let's start off with David's question. He had a question. He says, his question is, do we know who commissioned to paint that fresco that you showed us on the screen?
I didn't get it. I didn't get
I'm
the.
sorry. David had a question about the fresco a shot of the slide that you showed of the fresco of the Jesus, and in the far right-hand corner were some indigenous people who commissioned that piece of art.
That was Pope Alexander, the same guy that we
Oh,
were
okay.
talking about. He was the Pope at the time, Pope Alexander, the often referred to as a Borgia Pope, and he's the one that commissioned that particular one. That, by the way, that illustration will be fully explained and available on the website as well.
Okay, let's get to some other questions here. Let's see here. I'm going to also mention the names of the people who asked. That way we know that we're thinking of them. Well, actually, let's go with Gretchen. She says she's wanted to know if you knew or you were aware of Deb Haaland, who was the former Secretary of Interior. If she was aware of what you're doing, and perhaps maybe you reaching out to her as a Native person, if they knew of what you were doing.
Yes, of course. Who doesn't know Deb Haaland? Or if they don't, they should. Yes, we're so proud of the fact that she served um, in the as the Secretary of the Interior. And at that time, I wrote to her and let her know, but I haven't heard from her. If anyone knows Deb Haaland, please tell her about the project. Please,
Okay,
we will make
so that way you can get some confirmation. So definitely, so somebody out there can definitely pass that along. Just a comment from Mary. She says, as a third generation Mexican American and retired educator, she's thrilled and thankful for what you're doing on Dr. Rael-Gálvez. So again, a comment in support of what you're doing. We have a question from Ernie. Oh no, so let's go with Teresa. Teresa says, in San Antonio, Texas, we have over 5 Spanish missions. Can Spanish records in Mexico be used to find Native American individuals?
Yes. Thank you, Teresa, for tuning in from San Antonio. In fact, we're starting to do the work with mission records in both California and Texas, and we've just started to explore some of those records. Many of those records are actually in San Antonio. They're based there either in the Sacramento records, but wherever those records are that give us information, most of those are going to be Sacramento records that tell us about the mission, because that's really the point of the mission churches. But we are starting to explore all of those possibilities. Wherever the records are, we're following the record trail.
We have a question from Ernie, but I'm going to preface that by having you explain this policy by authorities of the king and queen of Castile and Aragon, the recuerdo, which basically was, I guess you would say, a way to indemnify slavery of the indigenous population. So if you would explain the recuerdo, then I'll follow it up with Ernie's question.
Sure. Thank you for that question. The requerimiento was this document that was read to people when the conquistadores entered into a territory, whether they were there or not, was read, basically laying claim to the land, resources, and the people of that's generally what the requerimiento is, requiring them to pay tribute to the Spanish crown. And so again, that I'll say that just very briefly. And even after slavery was illegal, right? So when Oñate comes into New Mexico in 1598, the requerimiento is read out loud to the land, and to the people, whether they understood or not. But it basically condemned them to colonial rule and to slavery. But all of that will be available on the website in much more detail as well.
Terrific. So Ernie, I'm going to follow up with Ernie's question. Ernie asks, as far as numbers of indigenous peoples that were enslaved during the period that you were discussing, this period of investigation, but is there any way to come up with some estimates or some general idea as to the numbers of people that were enslaved?
Yes. Thank you so much, Ernie, for that. Excuse me, for that question. Most of you are probably familiar with Andres Resendez's The Other Slavery. And so at the very back of his book, Appendix 1, he actually makes a guess at these numbers. And the totals that he's guessing at is at the high end about 5 million individuals. But I do want to say a couple of things about that. That really his is a guess, not based on the depth of research, right? So like not counting the number of baptisms. And Andres, what's wonderful about Andres's book, who's a advisor to the project, is the breadth of his work. And he's mostly paying attention to North America, right? Not South
Right.
America. Doesn't really focus on Argentina or Colombia or Venezuela. And again, he's not doing that depth of research to actually determine these numbers. Those estimates actually come from other people who have started to develop databases like we have in the local area. I think that number is way off. Because again, he's just dealing with North America mostly, and they're just preliminary estimates, not really based on the type of work that we're doing. We are going to actually come up with numbers that are solidified. The last thing I will say to that, Jamel Bowie, who is a New York Times reporter, said, it cautioned us, this should never be about numbers. And I totally agree with him. We are treating every person, every document as if it's unique, tracing that particular name. And I don't know what the numbers will be. I'm guessing it'll be 10, 20,000. I don't know. I don't know what those numbers are. I shouldn't actually guess. But the numbers do tell a story. But we are committed to finding every single document, every single imprint.
And certainly, as human beings, numbers give us a general idea as to the magnitude of something. With that stated, what you said, even just trying to make a guess sometimes is, not even possible. Let me follow up with, I have a question from David. It says, what archives in Southern California do you think, oops, I missed it. Here we go again. What archives do you think in Southern California do you think need researching for the Native Bound-Unbound project?
Oh my gosh. California is such an interesting place in that, so the Family Search is a online source available through Church of Latter-day Saints that has made these records, all records that they digitized possible. The only state, I think I'm right on this, that does not have those records digitized is California. They are digitized somewhere, but I've not been able to. They're not easily accessible. They're mostly in Santa Barbara, but they're actually kind of distributed in multiple archives. We are starting to work with various entities, a few professors at Cal Poly and others. But David, if you want to reach out to us, one, there's Sacramento records that we're working with. We're also working with census records post 1848. But we're looking at probate records, last wills and testaments. We are looking in every box, every archival thing. Eventually, we're not quite there right now, but anyone who wants to reach out to us, I'm going to actually type out who you can reach out to ask any questions, any follow-up questions.
Yeah, and we can put a link, whether it's an email or a website address, associated with our website once we get this back online, either on YouTube or our a website address. Shane wants to ask, well, first of all, he comments you on the credible work you're doing. And Shane basically states that, if indigenous slavery is mentioned at all in history, it's very brief. And so his question is basically what can be done. And in the past, certainly slavery has only been focused on slavery in the South, because that's obviously what the Civil War was all about. But his question is, how can we get more focus on indigenous slavery included in when we speak about U.S. history?
I'm so glad to see so many people who are educators, committed to education. I'm the son of a teacher, so this means a lot. Well, the answer to how do we get more focus on indigenous slavery is the project that we are about to launch. Is that we're making these resources available to the general public, and as I said earlier, that includes educators. But your question, Shane, actually makes me think that one of the things that I know I have my eye on soon is to actually get more funding to actually build curriculum units out of this, right? Because there's a very particular way in which particularly K through 12 educators are called to teach. And it's one thing to actually give them a bunch of the resources that we're going to provide, but it's another thing to help them develop curriculum units out of those. So right now the sources will be available, whatever we've been able to process, and that will be added every single day. There's going to be new things added, but eventually we actually want to get funding to actually develop curriculum.
Again, we have some more comments. Really appreciative of your work. We have some thank yous from Dana and from Donna. As we're getting close to the top of our hour, one of the things, and you mentioned about the first woman that was indigenously and then enslaved, but I think maybe perhaps some of our participants, our audience here, may not know something about this document that was published in 1542 by a Dominican priest, Bartholomew de las Casas. Can you comment on that, or would you be able to give us some insight to what was changing by the Spanish crown as early as 1542. I said 1492, 1542.
I here's what is coming to mind right now, because I can say so much about Bartolomé de las Casas, who is such a complex figure, Dominican friar who participated early in the conquest of the Caribbean, but also had enslaved people himself, both African and indigenous enslaved people in his hacienda. But he came to actually really be troubled by this, particularly early on with indigenous people and eventually with Africans who were enslaved. And he was an early abolitionist, if you will, and began to argue against the enslavement of indigenous people because he saw it up close. And he was the one that really pushed those policies with the Spanish crown that led to what are referred to as the new laws that would end up, quote, abolishing slavery, but it didn't abolish it. It just continued in multiple forms. But I could say a lot about that.
Yeah, it's very complex. And you're right. Bartholomew de las Casas was certainly a very complicated man. It did lead to the establishment of the Council of the Indies, which again was working to try and change the perspective of how the Spanish authorities saw the indigenous population. It did do one important thing. It saw them as human beings, and then they worked to bring them into the Catholic fold at the time. So this is a fascinating subject. We have so much more. What we're going to do, Dr. Rael-Gálvez, we're going to send you these questions that we have a number of them. We have from June, we have from Anne, we have from some more from Teresa and Sandy. So we're going to see if we can send all of this to you, and then perhaps maybe you can reach out to them through our website. Again, if anyone has other questions, again, our website, our email address to Crow Canyon is info@crowcanyon.org. If you have questions, further references, a link to Dr. Gálvez's website and information about the activities that are going on in Santa Fe this upcoming week, or in a few more weeks, don't hesitate to drop us a line at info@crowcanyon.org. So, Dr. Rael-Gálvez, it's an honor. I've learned so much more. I'm looking forward to kind of going up to Santa Fe. I'll be in Albuquerque, so we'll get a chance to kind of perhaps maybe put a virtual face to a human face. So I hope we can do that. And any closing comments, Dr. Rael-Gálvez? Just some closing comments.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's been such an honor. I'm worried that I was just looking at some of the notes in here that maybe my slides weren't advancing, so I'm a little worried about that. But hopefully they were eventually. I placed the registration. So our event, our launch at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture is closed. It's sold out. It's free. It's a free event, but you have to register. But the one at the National Hispanic Cultural Center is open, and we will live stream. So look out for our live stream. So those of you who are far, far away, we're going to live stream the event. So stay tuned. Write to us. I gave the registration, but I also gave the info at nativebound.unbound.org. Thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, certainly. So Dr. Rael-Gálvez's email is on the chat area there. Also, our email address at Canyon is also there as well. We are going to be putting this a follow-up email to those who've attended. And so if there's any questions, certainly please. We are thankful for all of you who've joined us today. We invite you to join us next week for another installment of our Crow Canyon webinar series. And again, great appreciation and thank you very much, Dr. Rael-Gálvez, and thank you for all those who have tuned in, and we are very appreciative for all that you do. So until next time, everyone take care, be safe, safe travels along the way, and mucho gusto, señor.
Igualmente. Gracias.
De nada. Adiós.